You have now gone through the first three phases of the innovation process. We started with the insight phase, where you chose and mapped the problem you wanted to address. Then, in the ideation phase, you generated potential solutions to the problem. In the development and test phase, you tested your hypothesis and found out if and how your solution solved the problem and created value for your user. And now it's time to enter the implement and scaling phase. We often find that people celebrate and feel that they are finished at this stage in the process, having a developed solution. And while celebrating progress is most definitely a good thing, this is when your solution is to be put to the hardest test, the real world. You will now take your solution from a controlled environment into the wild, and you might run into challenges you did not anticipate. Never forget that your goal is long-term impact, and this is secured in this phase, the implement and scaling phase. Implementation is not only to get the user to start using your solution, but to secure that they continue to use your solution and that it creates value for them over time. For many solutions, you also need to address how your solution fits challenges or maybe even changes the system it impacts to help enable long-term sustainability. In our innovation process, we include both implementation and scaling in the same phase because scaling can be seen as multiple implementations. In many ways, the same principles and steps apply to both activities. There are thousands of examples of solutions that never had any significant impact because they failed in the implementation phase. But luckily, you can do something about this. And in this video, we will highlight 3 principles and 5 steps that will be important to consider to successfully implement and scale your solution. Although implementation is in focus in this last phase, to succeed, you need to focus on implementation in all the phases of the innovation process. This can obviously be done in many ways, but choose to focus on the following 2 things. Firstly, you should address factors relevant to the context where your solution is to be used. For instance, in the insight phase, you can explore the availability of resources and relevant environmental, cultural, and ethical considerations. Then you can take these into account when choosing which solution to develop in the ideation phase. Secondly, in all the 4 phases, you should try to actively involve the people who will implement the solution to create ownership and to integrate context-specific knowledge in your project. If you plan to implement solution in several different contexts, include people from at least a few relevant communities. When you start implementing your solution, suddenly problems you weren't aware of before becomes very visible. Sometimes your users want to make changes to the solution to fit their context better. So in general, reinvention or changing and adjusting your solution is not a sign of your solution being flawed, but it is rather a sign of flexibility and a focus on maximum impact. It is shown that reinvention leads to higher success in assuring sustainable solutions. Creating sustainable and truly impactful innovations, extracting your solution's full potential often takes time, and sometimes even years. Remember not to rush the implementation and scaling phase. Endurance is one of the key factors of successful innovators. More often than not, your success will depend on whether external stakeholders choose to implement your solution. The following 5 steps are particularly relevant in such a situation, but also if you are in a position to decide that someone has to use your solution. Summarized, you should picture yourself guiding the users through a step-by-step process where you make them aware that your solution exists and give them some basic knowledge about it. Help them see that the solution is of interest and can deliver important value. Give them what they need to decide to use your solution. Help them implement the solution so that it delivers on its promise. and secure the long-term impact by facilitating for adjustments and integration into relevant systems and contexts. This might seem daunting at first, but the work that needs to be done is not necessarily all that difficult. The important point is to go through and find the most efficient way of doing the right things in each of these 5 steps. I will go through the 5 steps in a little more detail. But remember, tailor the activities to your project and your available resources. If your resources are limited, don't stop the project, but make sure to focus on the most important tasks. The implementation process begins when the users are presented with the solution for the first time and understand its benefits and how it works. In this step, you need to make sure that they are aware of your solution and how it will create value for them. It is important that they understand what sets it apart from other existing solutions and how it fits the context where they want to use it. In the persuasion stage, the users are building a favorable or unfavorable attitude towards your solution. They will consider elements such as if the solution is solving an important problem for them and if it is worth prioritizing. The credibility of all the information they receive surrounding the solution. And last, but in no way least, there are emotional and more invisible elements in play. They will consider how the solution will make them feel, if it will make them meet their functional needs, and how it will affect their status and prestige. All these combined will determine whether they will be persuaded to use your solution or not. Even though your users have concluded that your solution is desirable, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will end up actually using it. The reason for this can be an active decision based on not having enough resources or not being willing to accept the uncertainties or risks that comes with your new solution. More often though, we find that rejection is a result of not taking the time to make the final decision, even though the solution is being seen as valuable, or postponing the decision, not having the mandate, or not being able to persuade the people with the mandate. And sometimes they even decide that they want the solution, but not knowing how to implement it or not getting the necessary acceptance from the end users hinders them from taking the final decision. It is of great importance for you to be aware of the many different reasons affecting someone's decisions to use or not use a new solution. By taking them into account in the process, you can plan for it and maybe even prevent those uncertainties from occurring. The implementation step starts when someone puts your new solution to use. Organizations and users will always have some degree of uncertainty about the expected results and the cost of the implementation. On the other side, the problem first becomes visible when they discover them. Try to remember your own experience of using a smartphone for the first time, gradually discovering challenges and useful features. When implementing a new solution in an organizational setting, like a hospital or a ministry unit, commonly there are many people involved in the various stages. There are the individual users, the people in charge of the implementation process, and the ones who took the decision to implement it in the first place. All of these people have different needs in order to succeed. So, if possible, it might be wise to implement your solution step by step to decrease the risk and create more ownership and understanding. Remember to provide the necessary support to enable the use of the solution, both on an individual and an organizational level. You might find that you need to ensure appropriate management of expectations, provide technical support, methodological guidance materials, or other appropriate support functions to help your users take your solution into use. You should also view this as a great opportunity, an opportunity to learn how the solution is functioning in the different contexts in the real world, and build on the feedback to adjust or reinvent your solution. In this last step, the user might reverse the decision to use the solution if exposed to critique, strong opposition, difficulties in implementation or use, or lack of proof of value creation. You get confirmation when your solution moves from being something new to representing the new normal, and this step may continue for a lengthy period, depending on the nature of the solution. Our goal is always to secure long-term value by continuously adapting, improving, and scaling the solution. It can be useful to define the end game for your solution, a vision of how it looks like when your solution generates maximum impact, serving as a strategic planning and measuring tool to stay focused on solving the problem and generating value. For many innovations, the end game vision will be to reach the point where the new idea has become institutionalized as a crucial part of, for instance, the greater healthcare system. So, to summarize, there are 3 key principles to keep in mind throughout the innovation process. Focus on implementation from the start, reinvention is important, and secure impact in the long run. And when arriving at the implementation and scaling phase, the 5 steps just presented will help you understand how you can facilitate your solution's long-term use and maximum impact.